You are listening to Radiant Creators, a collaborative project composed of people whose passion, purpose, and dedication requires forging their own unique path of empowerment and livelihood. A radiant creator isn't making a living, they are living.
Ken Rohla is a natural health educator, researcher, and inventor from New Smyrna Beach, Florida. He offers cutting-edge products and services for regaining and optimizing health naturally, using ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science. Find out more about Ken Rohla at freshandalive.com. Glad to have you on the show today. And you're an elaborate, complex individual. I don't even know how you really start an interview with Ken Rohla because you've done a lot and you do a lot and you're working on a lot. And so I think that, here at Radiant Creators, really our mission with the podcast is to interview inspiring people and then kind of create sort of a magical elixir with that inspiration and then help others be inspired with it. That's really what we're trying to do. And you're definitely inspiring and, pretty courageous when I watch your YouTubes, and you definitely are not, you don't hold anything back. So one place I love to start is, how did you become you? Because you're doing a lot. You worked for 23 years in the medical industry. Then you started the Ken Rohla path. Yeah, it's very true. Early on in my life, like most people, I just pretty much did what I was told and how I was raised. But my whole life, I had always, when I would encounter, whatever people were teaching me or telling me, whether it was family or school or Boy Scouts or church or whatever, I just had my own ideas about it, and a lot of times when things didn't make sense, I would kind of point it out, and a lot of times that would get me in trouble. And also I loved, I was a class clown growing up, and I was always getting into trouble for goofing around in school because honestly, school was really boring for me. I could figure things out very quickly and still make good grades, and I actually the county or the city school board in where I lived actually changed the attendance policies because I skipped so much school in high school and still made good grades that I think I skipped like 6 weeks of school and still made A's and B's. And so they didn't like that very much. So they changed the attendance policies. So I've spent a whole life of kind of being a problem child, and I think that comes really from, in a much bigger sense, having memories of other lifetimes and perspectives that are influenced by other lifetimes, and just seeing a bigger picture than what is right in front of me. And so yeah, I always questioned authority. Not just to be a contrarian. I just wanted to really understand. Like when I was young, I had 3 friends whose fathers were ministers, and one of them was the minister at the Duke Chapel in North Carolina, and he had a very prestigious job. And these people were, PhDs in theology and divinity, and I really wanted to understand the nature of things, and so I looked up to people like that. But what they were telling me just didn't make any sense, and so I was always questioning. In Boy Scouts, I took. I went for a badge called God and Country, and I had to meet with a minister every week for several months and discuss, the nature of, I guess, spirituality and religion. And I remember really wanting to understand, because I figured these people are older than me, they've been educated, they know what they're talking about. And when the minister would start talking about heaven or something like that, I really wanted to understand, where is this place? And, is it up in the sky? Is it out in space? Is it another dimension or what? So I'd ask these very pesky questions that would just get me into trouble and tick people off. And so, after many years of doing that, I just realized it's like most people just believe what they're told, don't question their reality. And so as I got older, I did that more and more. And then I had a lot of very unusual experiences and I'd say kind of supernatural experiences in my youth that really made me question my reality and our whole reality, not just my own, but the whole paradigm on Earth. So I got into the medical system and was working in there just as a computer professional. And actually, I did work in hospitals too. And so the same thing, I saw with my own health that the things that they were recommending for my own health didn't work for degenerative illness. And so that kind of gave me experience with, the status quo of life. And then as I got older and wanted to do my own thing more and more, I chucked the corporate job and became a potter for 5 or 6 years and was doing that when 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, the pottery business tanked. And I had started teaching raw food classes just because my wife and I were living the living foods lifestyle and people wanted to know how to do it. So I started doing a few classes and it just exploded. And so that was really easy to do and it paid well, and the pottery business tanked with 9/11. So that's kind of what pulled me into natural health. But I had, I'd gone to engineering school and had studied electrical engineering and was very interested in that and quantum physics and stuff. And so I had a very different background coming into natural health. And so I would see things in the natural health arena and have understandings and explanations for things that people couldn't explain. And also because of my background working in medical pathology labs and stuff, I knew how to do testing and things to verify what I was seeing. So that's kind of how I got into the path that I'm on. And the older I've gotten, the less I care about what people think of me. I worked in the early 90s with a man named Yuval Brown, who developed water fuel technology, which is a free energy technology that could not only power everything on this planet non-toxically, but it can also clean up all the pollution, including radioactivity. And so working with him, and that really busted my paradigm open, because seeing all of these things that he was doing and other people were doing, these other inventors and engineers and physicists that were being attracted to his work, all these different kinds of free energy technologies and advanced technologies that what I was taught in school couldn't explain. And so I had to unlearn what I was taught in school and relearn a new physics and an understanding of the nature of, matter and energy and engineering. So that really trained me to not only question things, but also Yuval taught me and the people working with him to stand up for your beliefs and to be open and honest with it. And so, as it turned out, he became very public with his technology, and he wound up getting killed over it. And as many other people have that have attempted to come out with free energy technology. And so being, involved in that and seeing all of this drama unfold also gave me an appreciation for how things really work in the world, and particularly with governments and militaries and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's kind of how I got to where I'm at now.
Oh, no, it makes sense. I'd be curious what some of those supernatural experiences you had when you were a kid are that really maybe spark things, but also with your mentor, getting killed for his findings. Do you think that there's so many, an alarming amount of holistic doctors keep getting
whacked,
killed? Yeah, I'm trying to find a good word for it. I'm like, because you just don't. The way they're dying there's no way.
It's more than coincidental, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people that have no reason to kill themselves as a couple jump out a window. It just doesn't make sense. And so I think I'm not sure when that started, but I know the count is about 80.
Yeah.
And I mean, do you...
Within about 2 years, I think.
Within about 2 years. So would you say that those are... Something that I've noticed and they all had in common was that it seemed like a lot of them were onto natural treatments for cancer that seemed to be working. That's one thing I think I saw in common with a lot of them, but do you think there's an underlying reason those particular doctors got whacked?
Yeah, and of course, it's hard to say if every last one of them was assassinated, but certainly I would say a high degree of them probably were, because that's been my experience in working with people who had solutions for any kind of so-called incurable disease, or particularly for biowarfare agents or genetically engineered microbes. I've known people that have had solutions for those. and they were attacked heavily by the medical establishment and also the medical corporations. So it's most definitely is a high probability that these doctors are being assassinated. And it's because they have credibility. Since they're MDs and such, they've got credibility, whereas somebody like me, not having an MD, and also I don't attack the medical system or the industries. I see way too much pointing out of the problems, and I think by now most people know the problems. I prefer to focus on the solutions, and as I'm fond of saying, there are always solutions, because if you really get that consciousness creates reality, then the polarities of energy that create the problems always have an opposite polarity that creates solutions simultaneously. So I've just learned over the years in my own observations, finding solutions for all these big problems, that they're out there and have been out there. So I focus on that, and I've been fortunate. And I also know that I've been very protected. I've had a lot of people and angels of various kinds looking out for me, and also I pay attention and protect myself. But most certainly, there are a lot of people being killed, not just doctors. There are inventors of all kinds. I've known quite a few inventors of free energy technologies who were poisoned, and some killed and some survived. So it's definitely happening.
No, definitely it is. Well, one thing that I really like that you do in the YouTubes that I've seen of you, one actually that you call The Physics of How Consciousness Creates Reality, which is a good one, is you talk about things that are so eclectic. So, I mean, for me, I like it. You're speaking our language. We're like, yes. But one of the things that we've really gotten, it's really benefited us from listening to your work, is that you'll speak of pyramid power, scalar energy, Ormus, the most, I guess you'd say, extremely eclectic, etherical concepts that, and you speak about it in such an incredibly down-to-earth way. You'll talk about how you had some reptilian mentors, I guess you could say. Like you were getting some information from that group, I believe, and different topics. And to me, it isn't that out there. But I would say to the mainstream, to your average normal person, it's really out there. But there's something about the down-to-earth way you talk about it, like with such credibility. It sounds like you have a training as an electrician, and so it sounds like an electrician explaining Ohm's law to somebody when you're talking about scalar energy and such like that. The way that you present it, is that just natural? Do you think about it, or have you actually worked on how you present your material so that it's approachable for people?
Well, what I've found is that when I'm contemplating concepts or information, I visualize it. And so since I can visualize it, I just explain what I'm seeing to people, and apparently that works quite well for most people to be able to wrap their heads around it. And there are plenty of people out there. I mean, there's tons and tons of information on the internet that's very logical, like flat Earth, for example. It sounds very logical, and if you watch the arguments for it, it sounds very. It just sounds like it's very possible and plausible and understandable, and yet it could be wrong. And so the things that I teach, I do my best to back it up with science and facts. And usually, particularly like in that consciousness video, I don't have time in a talk like that, even though it was 2 hours long. I don't have time to cite all of the scientific resources behind what I'm saying. Usually when I do like 2-day workshops where I've got people's attention for, maybe 14, 16 hours, then I get into the details and the science so that people can look it up. And I do my best in these talks to cite sources that people can go and check these things out. So it's not just me like conjuring up these ideas and concepts. It's coming from, Nobel Prize winning scientists and inventors and all kinds of people who are discovering a lot of cutting edge stuff. But even with impeccable credentials, even these people like, say, Roger Penrose, who is an extremely well-credentialed physicist at Oxford, who is a contemporary of Stephen Hawking's and is very, very accomplished and recognized in his field. The moment he starts talking about this, more esoteric physics like scalar waves and things like this, then suddenly he's a quack. And this is the case for people in any field of study. I've become friends with Dr. Samir Osmanagic, who is the Bosnian archaeologist who discovered the largest pyramids in the world in Bosnia. And he was telling me how the leaders of the archaeological professional societies have been attacking him, and not just like verbally attacking him in the press, but actually getting people fired and getting the professional societies that archaeologists are members of to fire people and prevent archaeologists from even going to Bosnia to even look at the pyramids, because it would take billions of dollars away from countries like Egypt and Mexico that have lots of tourism for their pyramids. So this this control of information makes it look like that this cutting edge science is a bunch of new age nonsense. But there are lots of highly credentialed people, Nobel Prize winners and others in science and engineering, that are proving these things that I'm talking about. And when I have time in these talks, I will cite them. It's not just me giving some folksy talk and I'm a silver-tongued devil. I do my best to back it up with facts. I like dealing in the realm of facts.
No, definitely. In your the one talk you did, on consciousness creating reality, a question I'd have is, you mentioned that we are so a pyramid's kind of a scalar energy generator, and then so is our body. And so basically, I think one of the themes that I saw in that talk that you gave was, the more we, I guess you could say, clear our mind, and the more we have allow our body to be a healthy scalar wave emitter, transmitter, then literally the easier we create our reality. And you put that in a way that was so matter of fact that I guess I've heard that same thing said to some extent in many new age ways that, I don't know, most people that I know, I call them normals, wouldn't really, it just would kind of bounce off them. But then when you put it so scientifically, it has a real power to it. I mean, does that sound accurate?
Well, yeah, it's because there are scientists that are showing this stuff. So for example, with the human body and pyramids, they're actually antennas. They're fractal antennas that pick up this energy. This energy that scientists are now calling scalar waves. That is contested with the mainstream. The people at the leading edge of science know all about this. And believe you me, the militaries around the world and the intelligence communities, they know all about scalar waves and scalar energy. What it is superluminal light that comes from the centers of galaxies. And the centers of galaxies, there is a black hole, which is really a superluminal sun. The light that's coming out of it is traveling millions of times faster than what we've been told is the speed of light. And because it's traveling so fast, it has a lot of weird properties, and it appears invisible or dark to us, and therefore scientists call it dark energy or dark matter. So you've got this superluminal sun at the centers of galaxies. It's radiating outward all this light, and this light energy is traveling super fast, and it passes through matter like it's not even there. Because if you look at what matter is composed of, when you look at an atom, so for example, a hydrogen atom, if you blew a hydrogen atom up to the size of a football field, the nucleus would be about the size of a golf ball, and the electrons spinning around it would be about the size of a pea. And so you've got all of this space in between the two, and it's not empty. It's actually full of this superluminal light, this scalar energy that's coming from the centers of galaxies. And so that energy flows going way beyond the speed of light, and it can traverse huge distances in the cosmos very quickly. And so because of that, it's almost instantaneous, traveling many, many light years. And it's almost kind of like water in plumbing, where, if you got a pipe full of water and you push a plunger in one end, water's going to come out the other end. It's sort of like that. And so you don't have these particles traveling through space, propelling themselves like a rocket ship through space. They're everywhere. They're in the space between particles, and that light energy slows down and coagulates into our physical matter and the electromagnetic spectrum of energy that we can see and measure. And so it's really kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It's what everything is made of, and it flows through everything because it's passing through the subatomic structure of matter. And in fact, matter is made from that. It slows down and turns into matter. And so, as it turns out, when this energy comes out of the centers of galaxies, it's relayed through the cosmos through black holes or superluminal suns at the centers of stars and planets. People like Nassim Haramein, for example, have discovered that there are these black holes or singularities at the centers of planets and suns. And so what you have is this galactic web of black holes where this energy is being relayed from sun to sun to sun outward from the center of the galaxy. And when it comes to us, it's coming down from our sun and it's coming up from the center of the earth. And so pyramids can capture this energy just like an antenna, because that's what it is. It's just a scalar wave antenna. And then it will rebroadcast it in a local field. And our bodies do the same thing, because our bodies are a fractal antenna. Fractal meaning just a branching. And so, you look at our bodies, you've got the body itself is a branch. You've got 2 arms and 2 legs and a head and a trunk that are branching. You've got the blood system, the nervous system, the lymph system. It's all fractal. All these structures in the body that are fractal. And the DNA is a superconducting fractal antenna. It's loaded up with these superconducting monoatomic elements that we get from food and water that make it able to pick up scalar waves. The same thing with what people call the acupuncture meridians, or in Ayurveda, they call it the nadis. But all along the nervous system, you have these junctures of these superconducting minerals, and those junctures create little black holes. So you've got this web of black holes throughout the body. You also, on the brain neural pathways, the neural pathways of the brain are loaded up with these mineral deposits, which create these black holes. So the body's a web of black holes. The universe is a web of black holes. As above, so below. It's just this one continuous circuit or network of this scalar energy. And we pick it up just like pyramids do, just like trees do, just like every other living organism does, and rebroadcast it locally. And then when you go below our scale down to the cell level in the body, cells do the same thing. So do molecules, so do atoms, and so do subatomic particles, until you get down to just the energetics of it. So that's kind of how it works. And it's not just me saying this. When I'm doing longer presentations where I have more time to present the evidence of this stuff, there are people like, as I mentioned, Nassim Haramein, Roger Penrose, Dan Sheckman, who was a physicist who discovered what are called quasi crystals. They're basically crystalline structures that supposedly cannot exist in three-dimensional reality, and yet they do. Dr. Konstantin Mayle in Germany, who's a scalar physicist. Dr. Thomas Bearden, who was a nuclear physicist, a nuclear engineer for NASA. George Lukovsky, Russian. There's been a bunch of Russian scientists. Gosh, I'm trying to think. The big one. But there's a slew of scientists that are proving this stuff. So, not that you have to be a scientist to discover truth, but I do like to back up, what I'm talking about with the actual facts from the sources when I have time.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I can say a pyramid definitely is a fractal energy, a scalar energy antenna. We have one in the living room that just reaches the ceiling, and it's 72 degrees, and it's just big enough to be a little kind of fort to hang out in. And when you're in it, you feel it. You have to be a little sensitive, but I would invite anybody who isn't sure about pyramids to, I don't know, go hang out in one. Have you ever been in one of the large pyramids that exist? Ever been over to Egypt or?
I was just last June in the pyramids in Bosnia, yeah, and it was amazing. I mean, I was able to meditate. I was going into these tunnels they've excavated deep into the pyramids and meditating for like an hour a day in there, sometimes more than that, and drinking the water. And I had a lung infection that I found out later it was a GMO bug, but it just wouldn't go away. And normally I can get rid of stuff like that pretty quickly in a few days. It just wouldn't go away. It was hanging on. And after spending a couple of days in the pyramids and drinking the water, it went away. And they've had many healing testimonials at the Bosnian pyramids. And they just recently had one from a lady from Serbia who had stage 4 lung cancer, and she was given 30 days to live by her oncologist and told to go home and die and get her affairs in order. And she went into the pyramids and spent a couple hours a day inside of them, and she drank the water. And after 12 days, she went back to her oncologist, and she had absolutely no trace of cancer or the damage that the chemo and radiation had caused to her spleen and her liver. So, yeah, I've been in pyramids. I've built pyramids and of various kinds and sizes. And probably 25 years ago, I built a copper pyramid and had it in my office, a big one surrounding me, and also in my bedroom. I slept in one and had a lot of bizarre experiences with it. So, yeah, I've spent a fair amount of time with pyramids.
Oh, wow. I'd love to hear at least a short version of one of the bizarre experiences you had in your pyramid.
Well, when I would sleep inside my copper pyramid, I was having all kinds of crazy dreams, but also seeing entities and things. But also I noticed that it would accelerate manifestation of thought. So whatever I was thinking about and focusing on, it would manifest more quickly. And I would think about somebody, and they would call, that kind of stuff. There are a lot of synchronicities that seemed to accelerate when I was working around a pyramid. I also, when I had Samir Osmanagic here recently at my house, I was telling him, I gave him a supplement that will neutralize radioactivity in the body. And I said, you probably don't need this since you spend so much time around the pyramids, but just in case. And he said, yeah, I never get sick because he's around the pyramids all the time. So, yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and you mentioned that yours was copper. Is it? It seems like unless a person is pretty sure of what they're doing, it's better just to make it out of wood, not to have any metal unless you're.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just got excited because I had read Patrick Flanagan's book, Pyramid Power. And, I didn't know anything. And I think I was I was out of college, so I'd been through engineering school at the time, but I didn't know anything about this esoteric science. And I was just doing, I was trying to emulate what I read in Pyramid Power. And so, yeah, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have built it out of copper. Metals tend to guide or block scalar waves. And so you can use them in pyramid construction, but you need to know what you're doing. And I didn't really know what I was doing, although I did have some interesting experiences. I also built little pyramids and out of like copper rods and found that they would make food last longer, and they did make razor blades last longer.
Yeah, I would say that being in a pyramid can be a little bit addicting. I know that when the one I have is a portable, so it's actually it's just rope and wood, and it just folds and unfolds. And sometimes I want to stick it on the roof of the car because I'm going out in nature, and I want to take the pyramid so I can get that extra enhanced nature. Well, the Bosnia pyramid, that sounds amazing. I hope that it seems like that one to me holds more interest to go see than the ones in Egypt. I don't know why. That one just seems more intriguing and accessible.
Yeah, the ones in Egypt, from my understanding, I have not been there, but from what I hear from Samir and from people that I know have been there, that they've had all their artifacts taken out, and they're being lied about, the nature of what they are and that kind of stuff. And the people that are in charge of the Egyptian Antiquities department, they know very well what the pyramids are really about. They know that they've found extraterrestrial artifacts in chambers beneath them and stuff, and also monoatomic gold and all kinds of things that they're not telling the public about. And they are actively seeking to keep human history misconstrued. And Samir Osmanagic told me that that the head of the now former head of the Egyptian Antiquities Department actively not only sought to discredit him, but connected with his friends who are leaders in the European archaeological professional societies to get people fired and banned from going to Bosnia to even look at the pyramids. And why would they? It's understandable. Okay, they want to hang on to the money, that's flowing into Egypt, but it goes beyond that. It's about controlling the narrative on what human history really is on this planet. This planet, of course, is very old, millions of years old, maybe, or billions of years old. And who's to say that there haven't been civilizations on this planet other than human, or human that developed farther along technologically than we have many, many, hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago. And I think that that's what these pyramids are. I think they're artifacts from previous civilizations that were much more advanced. There are people like Dr. Alexander Golod in Russia and Valery Uvarov who have shown that that these pyramids around the world are part of a planetary pyramid grid system, and that there are pyramids on every continent, and they're spaced at very specific geographic intervals that coincide with scalar energy coming in a geometric pattern from the center of the Earth. So they're not monuments and they're not tombs. That's nonsense. They were used for probably multiple purposes and probably over time by different civilizations. But the truth about them has been obfuscated by pretty much everybody except now for Samir Osmanagic. And he's putting out some amazing information. I'm getting ready to release video of a talk he did here in my hometown about all of this stuff. And it's pretty mind-blowing what's being discovered. And he's got the evidence of it. So, yeah, there's a lot more going on there than what we're being told, as with most things.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult to be or challenging, I should say, to be a archaeologist at this time. Like, I look at Graham Hancock. I think his latest book, Magicians of the Gods, talks about Earth changes that maybe happen every 16,000 years or so. He pretty well makes a great case for, I think, just prior to Glacopeki being constructed, there was just after it was constructed, there was an Earth change where he talks about a comet hitting the polar ice cap, and that's why there's no big, crater to find and such like that. So, and if you've ever looked at his work, I mean, at least to me, I mean, it looks like it makes, at least to some extent, a pretty solid argument that history is not as we know it, definitely. And it's
right.
And and it seems like archaeology. Well, yeah, go ahead.
There's hard geological evidence that the Earth goes through pole shifts roughly every 26,000 years. And, you're not going to hear that usually in the mainstream news, but there's hard evidence of that, and it's accepted by a large number of geologists and archaeologists that we've had pole shifts, and we will continue probably to have pole shifts because of the Earth cycling through different parts of the universe. We get exposed to different kinds of energies. And comets, another thing. There are all kinds of things that have influenced the history of this planet and we're not being told the truth about.
Yeah, definitely. And when you know that the place has been wiped out a time or two, or that it's a regular cycle, it's a bit unsettling at first, but it's just better to know. I mean, and I see that, I didn't watch it on YouTube. I did not realize that it was there, but you have a recent talk on Ken Rohla discusses pyramid energy and what we can do with it. So that's what I'll definitely link it to in the show notes. There's a guy, we're down here in Scottsdale, and so we oftentimes go to Sedona, which is kind of very nice to live close to. And Yeah, it's a little goofy. I mean, it's got plenty. It's got plenty of New Age goofiness. I would never ever
Yep.
deny that. I mean, that is true. Um, but also, once you get outside of the main street, there, the land there seems to have. There's an amazing and impeccable energy that at least I feel there, and there's springs up there. So I always drive up there and fill up all the water jugs, and then bring that back because, like you were mentioning, you had some healing that took place while you were in the Bosnian pyramid and drinking the water, and I found that the time up there on some of the high spots and definitely drinking the water from there really seems to be a healing elixir. And there's this guy, his name is Mark Amaru Pinka, I think is his name. And he wrote this, he has a video. It's called the Sedona Vortex video, basically. And it's as out there as it gets. It's as Sedona as it gets. But he does say that all those big rock formations that we see are actually in a slightly different dimension. They are temples. And such, and that Sedona is this place where there's several different, frequencies of manifestation and history, all kind of overlaying each other, and then kind of becoming this powerful place in space-time. Anyway, thought I'd just throw that in there.
Well, yeah, actually, I've spent a fair amount of time in Sedona and Arizona because I went to Arizona State for college back in the 80s, and I get pulled out to Arizona every couple of years for conferences and things. So I've spent a fair amount of time in Sedona, and I can tell you also, there's some brilliant people in Sedona, and the vortex is there, because most people don't have an understanding of the physics of this stuff. It sounds all like New Age nonsense to talk about this stuff, but really what's going on is you've got this singularity at the center of the earth that's radiating energy, scalar waves outward, and scalar waves travel in vortices. They're kind of like a reverse tornado where, you've got the apex of the tornado on the ground and it goes up to a larger opening. Well, scalar waves, when they're emitting from a source, they actually, at the source, they're vortexing in very large circles, and they fold in on themselves like a tornado as they go away from their source. And eventually, they fold into a point. And depending on the type, frequency, and power behind them, they can reach out quite far. And so when you've got this energy, the scalar energy coming up from the center of the earth, it's coming out in different locations based on the geometry of the energy, because the energy is actually structured geometrically. And these vortices come up to the surface, and as they pass through the minerals in the mantle, those minerals are all crystalline, and crystals are oscillators. They alter the frequency of energy when you send energy through them. So whatever frequency that the scalar waves are coming up at, they're modulated by these natural minerals, which typically have frequencies that are harmonious and helpful to living organisms. And in the case of Sedona, you've got 5 large underground crystal deposits there that create those frequencies and create these scalar vortexes. So you've got these scalar energy vortices that come up from there, and they will, for example, clear chemtrails and things like that. The powers that be seem to understand this, because when I've been in Sedona, I've noticed that they were getting chemtrailed very, very heavily there, much more than most places. And there are people who have put powered scalar wave devices in Sedona to assist what's already naturally there to help keep that stuff clear. And if you notice, when you drive up from, say, the Phoenix towards Sedona, when you get about 75 miles outside of Sedona, you'll notice that the desert greens up. And as you mentioned, these springs are much more prevalent up around the Sedona area, because these scalar wave devices and the natural underground scalar physics is pulling the underground water up to the surface more, because underground water has monoatomic minerals in them that want to levitate. And so scalar waves will pull on them and make them levitate up to the surface more strongly than other places. And so, every time I've been to Sedona, since certain scalar devices were put in place there, I've noticed this, that you'll see driving up from Phoenix, the desert will be brown, the grass is brown, then all of a sudden the grass is green, the trees are all green, everything's alive, there's water, there's streams. It's because people are correcting the the damaging scalar frequencies are being used on that area.
That makes sense. One thing I've noticed as you're coming up to Sedona from Phoenix, you're going across the big mesa. The clouds above Sedona are unique, and I don't really know how to describe it to people. But if you are ever driving there from Phoenix, or you're flying over, look at the clouds. They're, as you start to acquire an eye to see it, they're different. They look disturbed sometimes, and it's really something to see. I would say that if a person looks for it and just kind of relaxes their eyes, they will notice that there is definitely energy coming up and down from the ground. It's an intense place to be.
Yeah, and I've been up there when there's no scalar interferometry going on, which the military and other people are using for weather warfare and also for frequency control of human consciousness and other purposes. But the military and these probably secret space programs, maybe some other organizations, these corporate conglomerates that arose out of World War II, they're using what's called scalar interferometers to modify weather, to do warfare against each other, and all kinds of stuff. And when those are in use, you will see fractal patterns and longitudinal wave patterns in the clouds. And I've been in Sedona when that's going on, and you can see and then they'll spray heavily with these airplanes that don't show up on radar. You can go onto websites and you can see the local air traffic in your area with the transponder codes and ID numbers and everything of the aircraft. And there'll be, maybe 8, 10, 12 planes overhead spraying these chemtrails, and none of those planes are showing up on radar. So there's something going on fishy there. But I have a lot of experience working with this because I work with scalar technology and I manufacture scalar technology, and I know what to look for. And so when you see these perfectly parallel rows of, looks like the clouds have been plowed, or you see these snowflake fractal patterns in the clouds, then you know that there's scalar interferometry going on. The natural frequencies from the geology there will not create those patterns. And so, but it will clear it more quickly.
Yeah, and then you've mentioned that you have that putting some pyramids, smaller ones, outside of your house, or I guess on top of your house, can help to clear the chemtrails out of your area. Mm-hmm. And one thing I was wondering is, do those pyramids have to be outdoors for that? Can they be in your house and do the same thing?
They can be. They work better if they're outdoors. If they're small ones, like what I typically show people how to make, which are little, 6-inch tall pyramids made out of organite, those need to be outside. But I manufacture a powered scalar wave generator that will do that, and that one ideally needs to be outdoors. I've had people tell me they put them indoors and see that it will clear the sky of pollution overhead, even though it was inside. But it works much better if it's outdoors. But you can, because scalar waves will pass through matter, although it will interfere with it to a certain degree.
No, that makes sense. So I think I'll move on to, here's a question for you. I know you've spoken about like the foundation that Fresh and Alive is built on, and you're doing business in a very unique way. It seems like the foundation that you've built things on, Fresh and Alive on, is not one built on profit and fear like most businesses. You have a different take on how to do business. And also, do you think that really to progress, to become nice and powerful scalar energy antennas ourselves, people need to do the best they can to get out of the rigid fear and profit-based corporate world that exists these days for most people? Well,
certainly people need to get out of fear. They don't necessarily have to leave their jobs in the corporate world because we need people to do some of those jobs. But yeah, it took me, decades of doing a lot of different kinds of work and therapies and things to reach the point where I realized in my 20s that my whole life I really kind of intuitively believed that we consciously create our reality, but I really started getting exposed to that in my 20s. For example, I first encountered the book Seth Speaks, which was some channel material, and it went on and on about, we create our reality. And so when I, being programmed as an engineer, I wanted to kind of empirically prove that to myself. And so I did kind of thought experiments and observed my thoughts and beliefs about things, and also observed the beliefs and thoughts of others and my friends and family. And what I saw was that whatever somebody believed was really what they were getting and creating. And so I became very conscious of, being aware of my thoughts and what I was thinking and speaking, because our language is a representation of our beliefs and our thoughts. And I did a lot of therapies. I did a lot of emotional healing work. I did a lot of reprogramming of unconscious beliefs over the years, because I had a lot of healing to do myself. And the more that you work on yourself and the more that you let go of that fear, the better life becomes, the more magical life becomes. And we are being heavily mind controlled on this planet to stay in fear, because it's a method that is being used by the powers that be to control people and to harvest and feed off of them in various ways. And so I've had a lot of lessons in letting go of fear, and it's not that I'm completely fearless, but I'd say I have less than most people. And so when you let go of the fear, you don't react the way that you do when you're living in fear and when you're fearful of things. And so particularly if you really, I did a lot of experiments proving to myself that, that I create my reality. And reaching that point, when you let go of the fear, then things just kind of fall in your lap. You don't, when you have an expectation of an outcome of something, or when you're attached to an outcome of something, that's where suffering comes in. When you don't have the expectation, certainly you make your plans and your dreams and, focus on what you want. But then if you're not too attached to it and you're not fearful, if it doesn't go the way you're anticipating and you let it unfold, it will actually unfold in a better way for you. And so in running a business, I just found that in working with people and managing a business, that I would not make decisions and react the way most people would, or hold the same beliefs about what a business is and how it should operate, because I didn't have that fear that most people have. And it's easy to get into fear when you're dealing with large amounts of money in a business. You got to make payroll, you've got to cover your bills and that kind of stuff. But when I was struggling was when I was in fear over that kind of stuff. And finally, I eventually gave up and said, if I'm supposed to be doing this, then I'm just going to let go of everything and I'm not going to worry about it. And if it's meant to be, it'll be. And if it's not, then I'll do something else. And as soon as I did that, everything started flowing and the money came in. I was nearly bankrupt at the time. And so things got much easier and it just flowed. And then dealing with employees, for example, when you're not fearful and employees have certain needs, you can look at things in a creative way and find solutions. There are always solutions for things. And also the way that I treat people and treat my employees, and the mission and purpose of the business itself, I was trained by marketing people over and over again that the primary mission and purpose of a business is to make a profit, because if you don't make a profit, then the business doesn't exist. And that certainly needs to be one of the top priorities, but it is not, for me, the top priority. The top priority for me and the mission and purpose of my business is to improve the lives of the people, the employees and myself and the people on this planet. That's the first mission and purpose and priority of the business. And secondary is to make a profit. And so when you do things that way, and you don't operate out of fear, even when a problem arises, it can be dealt with in a much more constructive way. For example, I think it was day before yesterday, we had a supplier that we had ordered a few $1,000s worth of stuff from in South America, and the owner of the company was in a car accident and was in a coma and couldn't run the company. And there was nobody that could, take over and run the company. And so we got in touch with them and said, well, if you can't deliver what we ordered, then, give us a refund and then we'll reorder when when you are able to. And the brother of the guy was saying, well, we're not authorized to do it. We can't do anything. So we waited around for a few weeks, and then and these people don't speak English either. So fortunately, I had an employee who speaks Portuguese. This was in Brazil. And so we got on the phone with him and just said, well, first of all, tell me what's going on with this guy's health. And then I listened to what he was saying and realized that we had some things that we could do to help him to recover from his damage. And so I offered him all of these resources and things, which he was very grateful for. And it set a completely different tone for the ensuing conversation. And then with the conversation, it was, okay, eventually, depending on how things go, somebody's going to have to deal with this, because even if this guy recovers, it's going to be months before he's fully well and able to run things. So let's be proactive and solve this problem. And so the brother decided then and there that he would, and so it was taken care of. And he came away feeling good about it. I came away feeling good about it. And that's the difference between, I could have just called him up and said, I'm going to sue you or whatever, which, or twist their arm or, whatever. But when you're not in fear of, typically people are like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money and, I need it and that kind of stuff. No, we can't afford it. But my philosophy is, well, okay, this is happening for a reason. And I think the reason is to figure out how to deal with this constructively and not in the usual fear-based way. And we'll manifest the money somewhere else anyway. And so it did. It all worked out. But it's very different. Your whole way of operating in life is very different. I don't react and respond to people the way most folks do. And therefore, most people do not treat me in the same way that they'll treat other people. I may encounter people that, are typically problem children and they're difficult to deal with or angry or whatever, and they don't act that way with me because I hold a different vibration, and I also don't react to what they're, whatever it is they're doing. And so they kind of lower their guard, and it just is a different way. So I think the biggest thing that people can do for themselves is letting go of the fear in their lives. And that, of course, is not an easy thing to do. How do you do that? And this is one of the things I teach. Emotional healing work, reprogramming, limiting, and self-destructive unconscious beliefs, physically healing and detoxifying the body. Because if you're inflamed and you don't feel good and you're depressed, you're deficient in, nutrients and your mind doesn't work well, you're going to be whacked and you're not going to react well to anything. And also attachment to things. I've done things like Vipassana meditation, where you go and take a 10-day meditation sit. You meditate, from 1 to 4 hours at a time for 12 hours a day. And you go through this amazing process that's very transformative. So when you do these things, that when you work on yourself and you introspect and you clear your own issues, then whatever is going on outside of you doesn't have such an impact on you.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I tend to see, rather than adversaries, I just see people that are in a different frequency. And it seems like the more we, I guess you could say, work on our own scalar energy antenna, the more light that we emit, and the more we can consciously create our reality. And I think also have sort of a paradoxical consciousness in a way where, like, when you're creating your reality, maybe you might think, I want this, but at the same time, you're also going, but whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act.
Yeah.
It's definitely a balancing act. It's not some new age platitudes either, it's very practical. The whole concept of spirituality to me is understanding the nature of your reality so that you can navigate it with abundance and joy. It's not about being holy or, better than somebody else or whatever. It's about understanding how things really operate in this physical universe and the non-physical universe so you can navigate through it with joy and abundance. And that is the case. The more that you align with the nature of the way things really are, the less attached you are to expectations. For example, if you've got religious programming of a certain kind or philosophical programming, and you believe, let's say it's a chaotic and random universe, then you're going to believe that, and that's what you're going to get. Whereas if you're open and honest with yourself and just observe how things work and are open-minded to other concepts of reality, you'll figure out what really works, and then you can navigate with joy and abundance.
It's like there was an author who was popular. Well, he's still popular. Stuart Wilde. He wrote a book back, I think, in the 70s, or latest would have been the 80s, called "Life Was Never Meant to Be a Struggle." That got quite popular, and he always talked about how he wanted his enlightenment on the hurry up. He didn't have time, and he didn't want to work very hard. He's like, why are these gurus always at the top of mountains? I don't do mountains.
That is so true. That is so profoundly true. A lot of people think that they have to struggle in order to attain enlightenment or happiness or whatever. And that's not the case at all. It completely depends on your beliefs. I have seen, when I worked with individuals doing consultations for their health, that a lot of times people would think that it's got to be hard work, it's got to be struggle. We all create our mountains to climb. If we didn't, life would be really boring. But some people create gentle slopes that are easy to walk up, and others create cliffhangers that they've got to use all kinds of special equipment and struggle and work hard to get over. And it just doesn't have to be that way. I've seen people who believed unconsciously that in order to get out of what appeared to be a hopeless situation, they had to die. So they'd manifest a deadly illness. And, like a bad marriage or a financial situation or something like that. Rather than dealing with the issues and resolving them and moving on with happiness and health, they would manifest a deadly disease. And so a lot of the trick for me was to get them to understand that it didn't have to be that way. They didn't have to go down that path of struggle or death to get out of the situation. And so that all comes with programming. It comes usually in a very young age. We have certain events that occur in our lives that make us believe that life is a certain way, that certain things are a certain way. And then we go through life interpreting everything as if that's true. And so our life is really just a series of stories that we've convinced ourselves of based on these experiences that we've had at a very young age that have programmed us with these beliefs. And so the trick is to do these techniques, emotional healing techniques, reprogramming the unconscious mind, that will release that. And when you release that stuff, then everything changes. Your whole mode of operation changes.
Oh, definitely. And those stories that you're talking about, they were called states by this one guy, Neville Goddard, this amazing old character, and you can find him on YouTube. And it's amazing. He sounds somewhat like you, actually. Incredible esoteric knowledge and in such an amazing matter-of-fact way. And these are older, and he really sounds like a World War II newsreel. And it's just the most amazing esoteric philosophy. And he would call those stories states. And he would just say that, your essential essence is not in a state. You're just choosing one. So you can choose whichever state you'd like. Just stop choosing victim, choose victor. You don't need to do that. And but when somebody is in a bad state, it can definitely be challenging to get them out of it. It's like somebody asked Ram Dass, I guess everyone knows who Ram Dass is, how do we get out of suffering? And he said, well, you don't. That's why they call it suffering. Because it's got you, Yeah,
and a little suffering here and there can be good for you. It's not that life has to be hunky-dory all the time, 24/7. There are benefits to a little suffering here and there, because for one thing, it gives you perspective. But it doesn't have to be, the constant pain and sorrow that a lot of people live in. I mean, 70% of Americans are on pharmaceuticals, and the majority of those are antidepressants. And I see a pandemic of depression and hopelessness with people partially because of the state of affairs on the planet, but also because of the mind control that's been going on Earth for millennia, that is this battle to control the consciousness of people on this planet, to keep them under reign and to keep them being fed off of in various ways through the monetary system. And energetically, actually, there are certain kinds of beings that feed off of scalar energy, which human consciousness is a form of scalar energy. So this manipulation and control of people has got a lot of people depressed and sad, and they don't know how to break out of it. And so that's what I've been teaching for many years, is how to break out of that.
Oh, definitely. I see the etheric entities that feed off the, call it scalar energy. I see them, to me, they manifest as little ghoulish creatures that jump from person to person, literally.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they'll actually find a person that is very negative, has a negative energy, and they'll just feed on that person, but that person will get the energy for them from other people. So that, like, energy vampire is actually to me, it's eclectic, but it's a fact.
Right, and it sounds, to a lot of people, that may sound like a bunch of new age nonsense or magical voodoo, but when you contemplate just the concept of extraterrestrials, for example, they're not all in our frequency range. They're not all physical, operating inside of three-dimensional physical reality. Some of them operate in frequency ranges outside of our physical realm and outside of our visual realm. And there are all kinds of life forms in my experience, because I can see and feel energy and entities and things. There are life forms that can exist outside of our physical range that are in a frequency range that can feed off the scalar energy that human beings put out. And so just like physical parasites in the body, you've got these energetic parasites that can come along and feed off of you. And certain types like certain frequencies of energy, and a lot of them like the frequency of fear. And they will attach to people and then mess with their minds and jerk them around to keep them in fear, so that they're continually being fed by this frequency of this scalar energy frequency of fear.
Absolutely. That's exactly what happens. And one thing about pharma, people getting more and more addicted to it, something I've noticed, and it just could be maybe I'm just manifesting it, I'm not sure, but we're here in Scottsdale, which it's kind of a big retirement area, but also it's kind of a growing tech city. Anyway, has a real diverse bunch of people, but I'm seeing here in Scottsdale and in Phoenix, it seems like I'm noticing people being more out of it when they drive. And it seems like an acceleration. Like, I'm noticing it more, like I would say, ever since sometime last year. I'm just noticing that people here's the thing. They're almost too out of shape to drive. Like, literally, they can't turn the wheel in their car. And they're also whacked out. It's really unique, so...
Yeah, I noticed that here in Florida as well. And at different times, people are worse than other times. And, sometimes I will correlate that with the scalar interferometry that may be going on, because I can see it in the patterns in the clouds. Sometimes I think it may be astrological arrangements, because the arrangements of the suns and the planets, all of this is this big scalar energy circuit. And it influences this, what scientists call cosmic energy. It's scalar energy coming down the planet. So that can have an effect on people. And then, as you mentioned, people's health status. Then also you've got energy weapons being used on Earth against people. And I know this for a fact, because some of the work that I do, I don't go public with. And we have seen evidence on cell phone towers of military scalar weaponry on cell phone towers. So I think that there are scalar interferometers being put on towers that are being used to affect the consciousness of people as well. To what purposes? It could be just experimental, or it could be to suppress people's awareness and to keep people complacent and not questioning, whatever's going on. But there are a lot of different influences that I think are affecting human consciousness on this planet. And the more that you surround yourself with protective technologies and also keep your mind and your body strong physically and mentally and emotionally, the less that stuff affects you.
Definitely, the less it affects you, and then also the more you become aware of it in others, you see it. And I do believe in the concept people talk about a lot these days of the ascension, where it seems like we're going both directions right now. It feels like in the last, to me, year or so, it seems like there used to be this neutral ground between people who were, I just call it self-awareness. They have this self-awareness, and that's a whole thing. It's taking care of your body, making it a good scalar energy antenna, and your spirituality and your intellect. There's people who are working on that, and they're doing it consciously, and then people who, well, they're not. But there used to be like two trenches, one on one side of the battleground, one on the other, and there was like this neutral ground between it where people could kind of hang out and have cocktails and things like that. And now it seems like, no, the trenches are right against each other. It seems like we're living in a time where there's no neutral ground anymore. You're either doing the work, or it seems like you're kind of disappearing or falling behind. I don't know if you've ever noticed anything like that. It seems like,
oh, certainly,
it's an intense time.
Well, you've got the Earth is passing through a part of the galaxy where there's more what mainstream scientists would call stronger frequencies and concentrations of cosmic radiation coming down, which is changing the Schumann resonance on the Earth, which is a pulsing the Earth's atmosphere that's created by this energy coming down, and that pulsing affects consciousness. That's very commonly shown, proven in mainstream science, that Schumann resonance affects living organisms. And I've heard the Schumann resonance has accelerated anywhere between 36, normally it's about 7.83 cycles per second or hertz. And I've heard it being as high as 200 at times. And so it's definitely at least, tripled now from where it was. And what that does is it accelerates people's brainwave states, and it doesn't allow them to get into deepest brainwave states at night. So they're stressed more at a subtle level. And of course, that has all kinds of negative consequences. But yeah, I see as these energies coming on the planet increase in intensity, it's more and more difficult to just be a fence sitter. And so what you see is people struggling more and more to hang on to the old paradigm, or people who are being progressive and proactive will seek to empower themselves and seek to improve themselves and expand their awareness and consciousness. Those people are doing okay. But the ones who are trying to hang on to the old paradigm are struggling because the energy coming onto this planet doesn't support the consciousness of that anymore.
I get it. And when I see their demeanor, it does seem like they feel like people who don't have a planet anymore because they're out of sync with it. It's very true. Well, I guess I just ask you two more things. Don't want to keep you too long. One thing I want to mention, actually, not a question, but actually worked with Energy Ed Edwards, something that you spoke about. Yeah. And he really, and I'll link to the talk in the show notes where you mentioned Ed, but literally he does sway you back and forth, and he can push you across the room.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing experience. So
now when you say that, you have to explain he can push you across the room when he's in another state.
Yes, he's in, oh my gosh, where is he? He's
in Georgia last I checked.
Georgia, yeah, and he's oftentimes traveling around now. He's doing more research is being done with him, on him. And I think just recently, I guess he found a way to tune up his signal. So I was going to work with him again. I guess he's found a way to intensify it. But he is a great person to work with. If anybody out there listening to this has maybe a relative or a friend who's like, I don't know, all this new agey stuff is crazy. It's like, well, just do an Ed session. And when when he levitates your ass, you can
exactly.
You can say it's all nonsense.
It's been scientifically confirmed. He's had a bunch of different scientists and universities study him, and they have confirmed that his energy is real. For folks that are listening that don't understand what we're talking about, he's an energy distance healer, and he can send energy to people and heal them. And of course, he doesn't make any claims, but Ed has been my go-to guy when I've had people who are at death's door. He can bring them back from the edge, and then I can, work on them more. But he did a demonstration on me over the phone. He was up in Georgia, and I'm here in Florida. And he said, okay, just stand upright, with your feet together. And he said, now I'm going to lock in on you, and I'm going to start pushing you. And when he did, he almost knocked me over. And it felt like I was a magnet with the North Pole, facing out, and along came another magnet with the North Pole and shoved me. It felt like a magnet shoving me, and I almost flipped over. I almost fell back over. So yeah, it's real, and he gets results, So for people who have somebody who may be an invalid who can't move or whatever, he might be able to send energy and help improve their condition.
Oh, definitely. And I found that he can help, for me, definitely help with emotional issues too. So when he charges up your nervous system, it'll help the energy flow, and even for somebody who might have depression, something like that. Definitely, Energy Ed, he doesn't make any claims, but it's amazing. And one of the charming things about working with Ed is it sounds like you're talking to somebody from Deliverance. He has such a strong accent. And
well, he came from the exact town where they filmed Deliverance. He came from Clayton, Georgia, which is where they filmed Deliverance.
Oh, it's so great. It's so great. We actually interviewed him on this show, and I'll link to that in the show notes. We talked to him, and he even did a little segment where he zapped everybody listening. So it is fun and real. And so I'll ask you one last question here. So we have talked a lot about, we need to tune our signal, get our scalar energy generator really working well. And definitely one thing that helps with that is keeping our body detoxed and keep purifying it. So I know asking for tips is really, really wide open question. You have videos that I'll link to about it where you've talked about that. But one thing you did speak of, and I believe it was how to neutralize radiation and chemtrails from the sky, your garden, and your body, a talk you did that's on YouTube. You mentioned we just call it Rohla moon powder detox here because it looks like moon dust when you mix it all up. But it's a bentonite, psyllium husk, apple pectin, some chia seeds, and charcoal. And you mentioned take those ingredients and mix those together. And I'd give people a tip out there: get powdered everything. You get powdered psyllium; it'll work a lot better. But the one thing that you didn't mention in the talk was how much and how often to help us clean these scalar antennas.
Okay. Well, what I always tell people, everybody needs to be detoxing on a daily basis now because we're ingesting all kinds of toxins, including low-level radiation sometimes in our food and our water from Fukushima and Chernobyl and other leaks. So that powder, you take equal parts of like apple pectin. You can use chia seed or flaxseed powder. I don't usually put psyllium seed in there. Well, I don't personally. Some people are sensitive to psyllium seed. It can aggravate their GI tract, so I just leave that out. But you can put that in there. And then some form of absorptive clay. I like using sacred clay from Vitality Herbs and Clay. But you can use bentonite, like Sunny 7 is available in pretty much any health food store, or Morlanite clay, and then food-grade charcoal. So I'll mix equal amounts of those in powder form, stir them up really good. And then I'll throw a couple of tablespoons of that into water. And I make this cocktail every day that's a mixture of water with that and some E3 Live frozen blue-green algae, which is really good for healing everything, really, but it's particularly good for the brain and brain function and memory. And it will detox the brain as well. It also helps create stem cells in the body. And then I always take a probiotic and enzymes. And I take a vitamin mineral complex called Intramax, it's got everything but the kitchen sink in it. It has pretty much everything the body needs on a daily basis, nutrient-wise. From time to time, every couple of years, I'll get testing to see if I'm deficient in any minerals. And if I need to supplement with specific minerals, I'll use Angstrom brand, Angstrom. And they can be kind of hard to find online if you Google them. So their website is angstrom-minerals.com. And I will take, very often I will take azomite powder as well, which is a rock powder that's high in ormus. And I vortex all this stuff. I have a machine called a vitalizer, which looks like a little blender, but it will vortex water in a strong magnetic field. And that will break the minerals down into bioavailable forms, and it will also create monoatomic minerals, which are extremely rejuvenative to the body. And then I also take zeolites every day. I have these nano zeolites from a company called Cosiva that are called Advanced TRS. And I'll take a few sprays, like 3 sprays of that in my mouth every day. Those nano zeolites are a mineral that have a very interesting molecular structure with a strong negative charge. And they can go anywhere in the body that water can go, and they'll latch onto free radicals and toxins and even pathogens and pull them out of the body. So I do that every day. And that actually saved my life from radiation poisoning. I've gotten radiation poisoning 3 times in my food. And that I was testing that advanced TRS for a few weeks. And fortunately, it grabbed the hot particles and pulled them out of my GI tract before they did a whole lot of damage. And I found out later with testing what was going on, because I had gamma and alpha and beta radiation damage in my guts. And also, I do take a supplement that neutralizes radiation in the body. It was the co-formulators of it got into a disagreement over it, so it's being renamed on our website, but it'll be out in a few days on our website. And that product is called Rad Zero. So I take that every day, and then of course I eat a predominantly live food diet and do a lot of juicing, and I take in a lot of chlorophyll, either in the form of green drinks or sometimes wheatgrass juice or chlorella. And then I also will make fermented medicines. You can actually make these fermented brews and throw in herbs or minerals or different things and have a really nutrient-dense probiotic, antioxidant, detox tonic. And I've been teaching people how to do that for many years. So if folks are interested in that, to get the basic recipe, they can go to downloads.freshandalive.com, downloads with an S, .freshandalive.com, and they can download my instructions there for how to make your own probiotic. And basically, you can make that probiotic in about 3 weeks, and you've got like 5 gallons of probiotic, which you can guzzle. And that's really, really, really good for creating a strong flora of beneficial organisms in the gut, which will improve health in many ways. But you can also ferment rock powders or algae or herbs, different types of nutrients, sea minerals. You can dump that all in there and ferment it for 3 or 4 months and make your own, gallons of your own brew that is like an elixir that's very healing and very nutrient dense, and for a fraction of the cost of buying supplements. So those are the kinds of things that I do on a daily basis. But it's important for people to understand, because our world is so toxic now, and it's coming down on our food and in our water supplies, you really got to be detoxing on a daily basis. And for one other thing, for people who are interested in some of the details and specific products a little bit more, if you go to my blog at freshandaliveblog.com, I have an article there called Staying Healthy in an Era of Biowarfare, GMOs, and Geoengineering, and I list specific products with links to them and that kind of stuff.
That's perfect, and we'll definitely link that in the show notes. And I love that protocol, because there is no one supplement or one technique that is going to cover all the bases. We really have to. It has to be what your life's about, really, to be healthy. And okay, so I'll let you go. This has been an amazing interview, and maybe one last thing, if you have a moment, would be your home shield. That is intriguing. So it looks like an orgonite pyramid, I believe, and then you say it's powered. And so what, I see the device on your website. It's incredibly intriguing. It looks a little pricey, but it isn't, if I understand what it does. Like, what will that offer people?
Well, the pyramids on our website is the Rest Shield, and that is a powered scalar wave generator. And it is pricey because it's got a lot of expensive stuff in it, and it's quite difficult to build. But it's basically an electronic circuit that generates scalar waves and pulses it at the Schumann resonance. And that alone will when you go to sleep at night, or even when you're awake, it will slow your brainwave states down and pull you into the deepest brainwave states. And so when you're sleeping, it doesn't make you sleepy, but it will, when you go to sleep, it will pull you into the, delta and gamma and theta brainwave states and get you in a really good deep sleep, so you feel much more rested and refreshed. And then, of course, when there's less stress on you, you feel better, your body responds better, you're in a better mood, you tend to have better relationships because of it. So it does that. It also protects against EMF, electromagnetic fields, by structuring them in a way that makes the waves, which are normally kind of random and chaotic, bouncing around and reflecting off of things and then passing through the body. Normally that interferes with cellular communication. But when you surround yourself with the scalar field from that thing, it makes the waves become coherent. So when they pass through the body, they're much quieter and interfere with cellular communication less. It also, we don't really advertise this, with the information on our website, but what I've discovered is it will increase synchronicities and make manifesting easier, because the scalar waves that it's putting out seem to act like carrier waves for your own brain waves. And, your brain and your nervous system are putting out the scalar field, these scalar waves all the time that operate at certain frequencies, and they will attract things to you. And this is kind of how we all create our reality. And so we've just noticed that when you're in the presence of this field, because of the frequencies that it operates, it also has it's got like 16 different natural minerals in it, including gemstones. And so those all put frequencies that will raise your frequency and also only pick up brain waves or thoughts that are, let's say, uplifting and empowering. And so it tends to diminish negative things in your life, and it tends to accelerate the manifestation of positive things. So that's what that does. It's really designed for sleep and EMF protection. The Home Shield is a device that is the similar technology, but it's developed for outdoor use because it's much more powerful, and most people can't handle that amount of energy indoors. But also, the Home Shield device will clear pollution out of the atmosphere for a 75-mile radius. And so that includes nuclear fallout, that includes geoengineering or chemtrail pollutants, and it includes good old-fashioned air pollution. So when you clean the pollution out of the atmosphere, what that does is balance the charge in the atmosphere, and then you get normal weather for your area. And so you won't see, well, for example, like in Arizona, we put these things out in the desert in Arizona, and the desert greens up. We put them in places where it was flooding, and the floods stop, but you get normal rainfall and normal weather. Or up in the north, in places where you might get 13 feet of snow and cause a lot of disruption, we put these things in place, and they get normal precipitation, they get normal snowfall, and without all of the difficulty. We put them in California where the drought's going on, it stops the drought out there. In Florida, it actually will stop hurricanes or make them bounce off and go out to sea or diminish in strength. And so, unfortunately, hurricanes, it's been my observation that hurricanes now are being geoengineered, and you can see the telltale patterns of fractal patterns and longitudinal wave patterns in the clouds of the hurricanes that come up toward Florida. But it will help protect against that kind of stuff. And so I only recently have started talking about this publicly. I don't normally talk about it, but the word needs to get out for people so that they can protect themselves.
Oh, definitely. And so the rest shield, that would be good, of course, in the bedroom, and then
your office.
Or the office then. So that's good basically for AM and PM. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. That'd be great.
Anywhere there's Wi-Fi, it really helps with Wi-Fi. I mean, if anybody has Wi-Fi in their homes, I highly recommend putting your Wi-Fi router on a timer and shutting it off at night at least so you can sleep then. And if you're going to have Wi-Fi on, I mean, I personally don't have it on. I have a wired network. But if you're going to use that, use it when you need it and turn it off when you don't need it. And have these devices, these scalar devices, will help protect you from the EMF and also help you get into deeper sleep states from Wi-Fi and from these DECT 6 cordless phones. Those are a big cause of sleep problems, and of course cell phones as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, around here we have a wired network, and then we turn the wireless on when, well, got to sync the phone or something, but in general,
exactly.
do our best to keep it off,
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for the time. This has been great.
Oh, my pleasure, Greg.